She slapped him in first class. Then the pilot got a call that grounded the entire plane. Jalen didn't need much. Just a seat by the window, some peace and quiet, and a cold drink for the flight. That's it. No drama, no show, no need to be seen. He arrived early at Sky Harbor Airport in Phoenix, Arizona, wearing a dark gray hoodie, tapered black slacks, and low-top sneakers so clean they could pass for new. A sleek carry-on rolled behind him. His AirPods were in, but no music was playing. He liked hearing what was going on around him, just in case. People looked at him the way they always did, trying to figure him out. Too young to be a businessman, too polished to be just another guy in sweats. He didn't smile much, but it wasn't out of rudeness. That was just how Jalen was. Reserved, observant, quiet. You had to earn the other side of him. At the gate, the agent scanned his ticket without a second glance, and Jalen made his way down the jet bridge into the cool, narrow tunnel of the plane. Seat 2A, first class. The other passengers were already settling in. Older couple in 1C and 1D, two suits chatting in 2C and 2D, and a young mom across the aisle trying to wrangle her toddler with one hand and buckle her seatbelt with the other. No one made a fuss, but a few double takes followed Jalen as he eased into his seat. He noticed. He always noticed. He was used to it. The flight attendant passed by him without a word at first. Short, mid-40s, shoulder-length blonde bob. Her name tag said Kay Donnelly. He gave her a nod. She didn't respond. Fine. Whatever. A few minutes later, she returned with drinks for the passengers. She handed out waters, juices, little glasses of champagne with practiced ease, smiling all the while, until she reached his row. He looked up and removed one AirPod. Could I get a sparkling water? No ice. Her smile dropped. Not all the way, but enough to notice. We're still boarding, sir, she said, tone clipped. Okay, just when you get a chance. No rush, he replied, calm. She stared at him for half a second longer than necessary, then walked off. The guy across the aisle raised an eyebrow. Man, that was weird, he muttered under his breath. Jalen didn't respond. He just put his AirPod back in and leaned against the window. This wasn't new, but something about the way she looked at him, like he didn't belong there, was different this time. 10 minutes pass, maybe more. The rest of the passengers board. Jalen glances at his watch, shifts in his seat. The plane's getting warm. He sees her again, Kay Donnelly, handing a ginger ale to a man 2 rows behind him. She's smiling, making small talk. Still no sparkling water. Jalen presses the call button. Not because he's thirsty, not because he wants to cause a problem, just because he's wondering now, was this deliberate? She approaches, jaw tight, not angry exactly, but different. Yes, she says flatly. Hey, Jalen begins polite. Just checking. Could I still get that sparkling water? No ice like I mentioned earlier. She takes a beat before answering. I told you, sir, we were still boarding. And we're boarded now, he replies evenly. I just figured you forgot. I didn't forget, she snaps, suddenly louder than necessary. The conversation turns heads. A man a few rows back lifts his phone, not recording. Yet. Just watching. Okay, Jalen says, holding both hands up slightly, not aggressive, just clear. I wasn't trying to be rude. You're being very demanding for someone who hasn't even taken off yet, she fires back. That does it. The guy in 2D shifts uncomfortably in his seat. Come on, he mutters, just loud enough to be heard. I'm sorry, Jalen says slowly, still calm, still measured. I asked for a drink. That's it. If that's demanding, then maybe you're in the wrong line of work. Her expression stiffens like stone. You people always have something to say, she mutters under her breath. Not loud, but not quiet enough. He hears it, and so do the 2 guys across from him. One of them, a man in a navy sport coat, leans in. Hey, did you just say what I think you said? He asks her. She ignores him, turns sharply and walks to the galley. You people? Jalen repeats, half laughing in disbelief. Yo, what did I do? Ask for water? He looks around. Half the cabin is paying attention now. The mother across the aisle is holding her toddler a little closer, lips tight. The old couple in 1C and 1D look confused, like they're not sure what just happened, but they definitely felt the temperature in the room shift. 3 minutes later, she returns. No drink, just attitude. I don't appreciate your tone, she says. You're being combative. And if you can't behave, I can ask the captain to have you removed before we take off. Jalen laughs, not out of amusement, but disbelief. Wait, you're threatening to kick me off this plane because I asked for a drink, and now you're calling me combative? She doesn't respond. The other passengers murmur. I've been sitting here minding my business, Jalen continues, now speaking more to the people around him than to her. She hasn't said a word to me until I pressed the call button. Then I'm demanding. Then I'm aggressive. Then you people. And now she's threatening to get me kicked off the flight? You need to lower your voice, she says quickly. I'm speaking in the same tone I used the first time I asked for water, he fires back. If you're feeling threatened right now, maybe it's because you expected me to just let it slide. But I'm not going to. More phones come out. This time, they're recording. She sees them, and something in her posture shifts, just for a second. A flicker of discomfort, of regret. But it's too late. She leans in close to Jalen's seat. Her voice is low, sharp, meant only for him. You think you're special? She hisses. Wearing your little name brand hoodie, sitting up here like you're somebody? He doesn't answer, so she slaps him. Just like that. One loud, open-handed slap to the side of his face. The cabin goes silent. Gasps. A dropped phone. The toddler starts crying. No one moves. Jalen doesn't say a word. He just slowly turns his head to look at her. Her hand trembles. She seems stunned by what she just did. Like maybe she thought she was going to scare him, or embarrass him, or shut him up. But instead, he just stares at her, calm, silent, unbothered. Then, with the same slow ease he used when he walked onto the plane, he reaches into his jacket pocket, pulls out his phone, dials. Hey, he says into the phone, clear and calm. It's me. I need you to handle something. But the real turbulence hadn't even started yet. The entire cabin was holding its breath. Jalen didn't raise his voice, didn't move fast, didn't even blink hard. He just sat there, one hand on his cheek, the other holding his phone, speaking into it like he was confirming a lunch reservation. I'm on flight 482 to LA, he said into the phone, eyes locked on the woman still standing over him. First class, seat 2A. Flight attendant just struck me in front of at least 20 witnesses. He paused, listening. No, he said flatly. No provocation. I asked for a drink. That's it. The person on the other end must have asked a question because Jalen's expression didn't change. But he said, yeah, I'm fine. Just do what you need to do. He ended the call. The flight attendant, Kay Donnelly, was pale now. Not ghost white, but close. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Like she wanted to explain, but there was nothing left to say. She looked around, and the people in first class wouldn't meet her eyes. The man across the aisle, the one who had raised an eyebrow earlier, stood up slowly and turned toward the cockpit. I'm going to go tell the pilot what just happened, he said to nobody in particular. She flinched. You don't need to do that. Yeah, he said sharply, spinning back around. Yeah, I do. The guy in the sport coat who had been recording looked at Jalen. You good, man? He asked, camera still rolling. I'm all right, Jalen said. Just disappointed. Now other passengers were speaking up. I saw her hit him. He didn't do anything. She called him you people. Like, what does that even mean? A woman 3 rows back stood up. Do we know who he is? She asked. He sounds connected. No one had to answer. Jalen took off his hoodie, folding it in his lap. Underneath it, he was wearing a crisp white t-shirt. No jewelry, no logos, just clean lines and presence. Somehow, the more quiet he was, the louder the room got. Up front, the cockpit door opened and the pilot stepped out. Tall, graying at the temples, firm voice. What's going on here? He asked, looking around. Before anyone else could speak, the man who had walked up to the front said, She hit him, the flight attendant. Unprovoked. People saw it. The pilot's face froze. Ma'am, he said, turning to Donnelly. Is that true? She was flustered now, words stumbling out. He was being aggressive. He was disrespectful. Did he touch you? The pilot interrupted. She shook her head. Did he raise his voice? No answer. Did he threaten you in any way? Still nothing. I'm gonna need you to step into the galley, the pilot said finally. Now. She hesitated, but then she walked away. The pilot turned to Jalen. "Sir, I apologize. I'm going to call this in and see what options we have before takeoff." Jalen nodded. "I already made a call." The pilot looked at him, really looked, and you could see it click. "Understood." The pilot walked back into the cockpit. One by one, the passengers started murmuring again, some in shock, some in disbelief, and a few quietly in awe, because they were starting to get the picture. This wasn't just some guy in first class with a nice carry-on. This man had resources, connections, people. And the moment that flight attendant laid her hand on him, everything changed. But the real shift wasn't in the air. It was happening on the ground, where the wheels were already turning. Back on the ground in Phoenix, the phone that Jalen called was already bouncing through a chain of hands faster than most people could imagine. First, it rang in a private office inside a sleek, black glass building just off Camelback Road, about 15 minutes from the airport. Then it was redirected to a secure line in San Francisco. By the time the plane was still taxiing to the runway, Tobias Reed, senior legal strategist for the Whitmore Group, had the call open on speaker in a closed-door conference room. Client says he was slapped on a commercial flight, first class. Entire incident took place in front of multiple witnesses, recording already circulating online, a younger associate said, rattling off the report while typing. "Jesus," Tobias muttered. "Did she know who he was?" "Not yet." Tobias exhaled, stood up, and looked out the window. His job wasn't just legal cleanup. He was part fixer, part protector. And when it came to Leonard Whitmore's only son, his job was also personal. "Make the call," Tobias said. "Pull the plane back. I don't care if they're 2 feet from takeoff." "Sir, that would require—" "I know exactly what it requires," Tobias snapped. "Call the airline's executive ops. Tell them it's a high-priority client matter. Say it loud." Meanwhile, back on Flight 482, Jalen leaned back in his seat. His cheek was still a little red. Not that it mattered. The slap wasn't what stung. It was the fact that this still happened. No matter who he was, no matter what his last name meant, in the eyes of some people, he was still just that guy, that kid in a hoodie, the one who didn't belong in first class. The plane started to rumble down the taxiway. Then it stopped. The flight attendant who had hit him was sitting in the galley, eyes darting around, legs bouncing. She could feel it. Something wasn't right. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the delay. We've been asked to return to the gate for a brief security matter. We appreciate your patience." Every head turned. Some people whispered. A man in 3A started texting furiously. "Yo, they're turning the plane around. Over that slap. No way." Jalen didn't move. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Tobias. "Sit tight. You're going to be met by the right people. Nothing to worry about." The woman in the galley peeked around the corner, pale now, sweat on her upper lip. She tried to approach the pilot, but he raised a hand to stop her. "Not now," he said sharply. 2 rows back, a middle-aged woman whispered to her husband, "Didn't that guy's dad create that smart city thing in Tempe?" The husband nodded slowly. "Yeah, Whitmore Technologies. That's him. That's his son." Jalen heard it. He didn't acknowledge it. He just sat there, letting the world do what it was already doing, catching up. The plane reached the gate again. No one spoke. Until a click echoed through the cabin. The door opened. 3 people stood outside. One wore a badge. One wore a suit. The third carried a tablet and a pin with the airline's logo. They stepped on board without saying a word. The woman in the galley stood up quickly. "This is all a misunderstanding." The man in the suit raised a hand. "Ma'am, step off the aircraft." "But I didn't." "Now." The badge didn't even blink. He just waited for her to walk past. As she passed Jalen's row, she slowed down. For a second, her lips parted, like she wanted to say sorry, or explain, or maybe just ask him who he was. But she didn't. She walked off the plane. And Jalen? He didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't even look up. But the passengers around him would never look at him the same again. Once the door closed behind the flight attendant, the cabin filled with a strange silence. Not the usual kind that comes before takeoff. This was different, heavy, charged. The kind of quiet people feel when they know something serious just happened, but no one quite knows what to say. Then the pilot came back on the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a change in flight status." This aircraft will remain on the ground for the time being while we complete a mandatory incident report and further review instructions from airline operations. Please remain seated. We appreciate your cooperation. Translation? This flight ain't going anywhere. Gasps, groans. A few passengers stood up to get bags, only to be told to sit back down. A man in a beanie muttered, "That's what happens when you slap the wrong one." Jalen still hadn't moved, still sitting in 2A, calm, posture straight. He wasn't smug. He wasn't flexing. He was just still. The guy in the Navy sport coat leaned across the aisle. "Yo," he said low. "Who's your dad, man? That was some power move type stuff." Jalen looked at him for the first time and offered a small smile. "Just someone who taught me how to handle things quietly." Across the cabin, someone else pulled up their phone. News alerts were already starting to pop. A tweet from someone who had live tweeted the slap had over 60,000 likes. The comments were wild. "She slapped a billionaire's son and thought, what, he'd just sit there? You know you messed up when the plane turns around before the wheels even lift. This is why you don't judge people by how they look." A flight supervisor came on board next, short woman with tight curly hair, dressed in a sharp blazer, tablet in hand. She walked straight to Jalen. "Mr. Witt." "Jalen," she corrected herself quickly. "Is there anything we can get you at this time?" He shook his head. "I'm good. We've grounded the flight at corporate request. We'll be reassigning the other passengers to new flights within the hour. Your car will meet you directly at the gate." He nodded again. "Appreciate it." Then, finally, he stood up. The cabin noticed, all at once. He pulled his carry-on from the overhead bin, slid the hoodie over his shoulder, and adjusted his watch. No rush, no attitude, just that same quiet energy. He looked around, made eye contact with the young mom across the aisle, and nodded once. She gave him a look, half apology, half admiration. Then he turned to walk off the plane, and as he passed the pilot, who stood just outside the cockpit, they exchanged a look. Respect. No words needed. Back in the terminal, a black SUV with tinted windows idled just outside the private side door. One of the security staff escorted Jalen there. Inside, the driver spoke into his mic. "Passengers secure, we're rolling." Back at the gate, passengers were buzzing. What just happened? Did we all witness something historic? Someone muttered, "This might go viral by tomorrow." Another said, "Nah, this already went viral." But Jalen wasn't thinking about viral. He was thinking about how many people like him don't have the last name, the money, or the reach to make things stop mid-air. He knew he was lucky, but he also knew it shouldn't take luck to be treated like a human being. But what came next would shift the story from private embarrassment to national conversation. By the time Jalen's SUV merged onto the I-10, headed toward a private office in Scottsdale, the story was already on the homepage of 3 major news sites. Passenger allegedly assaulted by flight attendant in first class. Plane grounded before takeoff after confrontation caught on video. Son of tech mogul involved in mid-flight incident, airline under fire. The videos weren't edited. They didn't need to be. Raw clips from phones showed everything. The moment she slapped him, the stunned silence, the calm call he made afterward. A slow-motion version of the slap was already on TikTok, racking up millions of views. Someone had even added text over it. When you forget what century it is. Inside a windowless room at the airline's operations center, 2 lawyers, a PR manager, and an executive VP were glued to their screens. "This is bad," the VP said, rubbing his forehead, like, real bad. "The video's clear, there's no ambiguity," the PR manager added. He never raised his voice. She struck him. "And he's not just anybody," the younger lawyer chimed in. "That's Leonard's son, as in Whitmore Tech, federal contracts, smart city infrastructure, that Whitmore." "Do we know what he wants?" the VP asked. The PR rep checked her phone. "Not yet, but his team has a reputation. They don't yell, they don't rant, they just move, quietly, and expensively." Meanwhile, in the terminal, the passengers from Flight 482 were being rerouted. A few reporters were already circling. Microphones out, cameras rolling. One young man in a hoodie and Jordan stood near the gate, talking directly to a reporter. "I saw it. She just hit him. No warning. He was chill the whole time. Didn't even raise his voice. People don't want to say it, but you know why it happened." Because he was black? The reporter asked. The guy nodded slowly. Because he was black and in first class. That's it. She didn't think he belonged. Another passenger, an older woman in a green blazer, stood nearby. She said, "You people." I heard it, clear as day. The reporter blinked. And what do you think she meant? I don't think she meant frequent flyers. Back at Whitmore HQ, Jalen sat across from Tobias Reed. He was sipping coffee, eyes scanning one of the headlines. He looked tired, saw it. Not from stress. He'd been through worse, but from having to explain again what shouldn't need explaining. Tobias leaned forward. We can press charges, file a civil suit. You've got witnesses. You've got footage. It's clean. They'll settle in a heartbeat. Jalen shook his head. I don't want a payout. I want accountability. Firing her would be a start. Jalen sighed. They'll fire her, sure, quietly. Say it was a training issue or she had a bad day. I don't want her life ruined, but I want them to say out loud what happened, on the record. You want the airline to own it publicly? Yes, because if they don't, this happens again in a month, to someone who doesn't have what I have. Tobias nodded slowly. Then we'll push for that. A statement, a public apology, retraining protocols, media engagement on your terms. And I want to talk to her, Jalen added. Not to yell, just to ask her why. That part surprised Tobias, but he didn't argue. Later that evening, the airline issued a carefully worded statement. We are aware of an incident on Flight 482 from Phoenix to Los Angeles involving one of our cabin crew and a passenger. After a thorough internal review and consultation with relevant parties, the crew member involved has been placed on administrative leave, and our team is cooperating with all further investigation. But that wasn't enough. The internet wasn't finished. Neither was the public. Placed on leave? One tweet read. She slapped a man on camera. They'd have tackled him if the roles were reversed, another added. And then, on Instagram, Jalen posted a single line with a short video of him exiting the plane. Grace is not weakness, but silence is no longer an option. But before the conversation could settle, Jalen asked for one more thing, face to face, just him and the woman who hit him. 3 days later, Jalen sat across from her in a plain, unmarked meeting room at a neutral legal office in downtown Phoenix. No cameras, no microphones, just 2 chairs, a table, and a heavy silence. Karen Donnelly looked smaller than she had on the plane. She wasn't in uniform now, just a light cardigan and slacks. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap. Jalen sat forward, elbows on his knees, watching her. He hadn't spoken yet. Her lawyer sat beside her, fidgeting with his pen, but didn't interrupt. This was Jalen's meeting, his condition. He didn't ask for money. He didn't want a payout. He just wanted this, a conversation. I didn't know who you were, she said finally, voice dry and low. That's part of the problem, Jalen replied. Because if you did, you might have acted different. Which means this isn't really about me. It's about how you treat people you think don't matter. She looked down. I've worked flights for 15 years, she said, still not meeting his eyes. You deal with all kinds of people. Some are rude, some are entitled, some just come at you the wrong way. I thought you were... Say it, Jalen interrupted gently. She closed her eyes, swallowed. I thought you were trouble. Why? Another pause. She shook her head, but he waited. You had your hood up, she said finally. You didn't smile. You didn't talk like the other passengers. I thought you were being difficult. You thought I didn't belong in that seat. She didn't deny it. I made a mistake, she whispered. I saw you and made assumptions. I lost my job. I lost everything. No, Jalen said, voice steady. You lost the mask. The thing that let you hide your bias behind fake smiles and polite phrases. You didn't lose everything. You got exposed. She finally looked at him. I'm sorry, she said, eyes damp. I was wrong. I'm not here to punish you, Jalen said. I don't believe in ruining people. I believe in learning. But I want you to understand. People die because of assumptions like yours. People end up in jail, fired, shot, beaten, humiliated, all because somebody felt uncomfortable. I wasn't scared, she said. I was conditioned, he finished for her. You were conditioned to see me as a problem. And I need you to unlearn that. not just for me, for the next person who boards your plane, or stands in your line, or walks past your kid. Silence. Then slowly, she nodded. When Jalen walked out of that room, he didn't feel triumphant. He felt something else, settled. He knew the internet would keep spinning, the people would keep talking, the memes, the opinions, the debates. They'd dissect every word. They already were. But this was the part the cameras didn't catch, the part that mattered. A week later, the airline held a live press conference. A spokesperson issued a public apology to Jalen by name and confirmed a review of their training policies. A new anti-bias program was introduced. They even announced plans to collaborate with independent civil rights groups to assess their internal culture. Jalen didn't show up to the press conference. He didn't need to. His impact was already in motion. Instead, he released a short video on his father's foundation page. He sat on a stool in a simple white tee, no branding, no flair, just him. No one should have to prove their worth to be treated with respect, he said calmly, and no one should be judged by the seat they sit in, the clothes they wear, or the name on their ID. This wasn't about revenge. This was about accountability. It was about saying, enough. He ended with a quiet reminder. Don't just treat people better because of who they might be. Treat them better because that's who you are. The comments poured in. So did the support. People shared their own stories of being profiled, disrespected, underestimated, and some admitted, painfully and honestly, that they had been on the other side of that equation, that they had judged, assumed, reacted, and that now they were listening. So here's the question we all need to ask ourselves. How do you treat someone when you think they can't do anything for you? That answer? It says everything about who you are. Let this story be more than just a headline. Let it be a moment to pause, to rethink, and to do better. Because grace without growth is just silence dressed up to feel nice. And silence never changed anything.